I think the #1 piece of advice that we can give, no matter where you are in parenting, is that there's not one conversation you have. You have conversations early and often. And so much of our kids' education, whether we like it or not, is occurring online. My name is Sean Clifford. Most importantly, I'm the father of 4 and the founder and CEO of Canopy. Canopy is a technology company that wants to provide families a way to experience the good of the internet without the bad. We launched about 3 years ago, and the very first product that we have helps kids get in the online world without being exposed to pornography. In order to do that, we're partnering with this amazing Israeli technology company that has developed ways to scan internet traffic in real time, look at every word, every image, every video, and then pull out all the bad stuff, but then still serve up that which is acceptable and appropriate for kids. So that's our first product. This technology has been deployed at scale in Israel. There they protect 2 million devices, 90% of the schools. And we're incredibly excited to bring that to the United States with hopes that we can forge a better way forward on how families adopt technology into their lives.
Tell us a little about you. Did you grow up in a strong home or a difficulty there?
I am incredibly blessed. I've got 2 parents that I love dearly, and they've been absolutely wonderful. They did divorce when I was about 7 years old, but they've been great parents ever since and have provided kind of a strong family foundation. So that's how I grew up. I'm now married. We have our 15-year wedding anniversary this year, and we have 4 kids at home. And in fact, my youngest just turned 3 years old yesterday.
Oh, that's adorable. Have you taken things that you've learned from your childhood and applied them to raising your own kids?
Gosh, such a great question. In some respects, yes. I feel incredibly lucky and blessed by the upbringing that I had. And yet I think one of the challenges that a lot of parents have to contend with is that the playbook that my parents used doesn't apply anymore, because so many of the challenges, so many of the activities and interactions that kids have today are just wholly different. When I went to high school, I think my senior year, I had a flip phone, but there was no texting, there was nothing like that. And so parents today have to contend with the average American child gets their own device, whether it's a tablet or a smartphone, at age 11. And so that brings a source of entertainment, education, interaction with peers, connection to family, right? So some good things in there, but also some challenges. And I think we all appreciate that technology is incredibly formative in shaping us in powerful ways. And we are trying as parents to figure out what the new playbook will be. And that's in part what Canopy hopes to help parents with.
How did you personally, or have you, either with your own children or was it with other people's children, or just thinking that of what's coming in the future, come to this idea that I need to do something here? I mean, obviously if Canopy is only 3 years old, you must have been doing something before. Maybe you switched out?
It's kind of 2 different origin stories. One origin story is that I was working in Washington, D.C. with a number of large tech companies and a lot of pro-family organizations, and just saw the massive gap between them and the different visions for where the world would be heading. And I thought there would be some negative consequences for the family if that trajectory continued, and that there would be an opportunity to jump in and try and serve that families better than what they were being provided. The second was, I have a number of friends who have older kids and saw from those families 2 things. Number one, just the suffering and the pain that attends exposure to pornography. And this manifests itself in impact on marriage and relationships, but then also just kids when they see it. There's a difference between being exposed to a Playboy, which is bad, and I don't condone that, and being exposed to Pornhub today. It is a whole different category. And I think a lot of the old mentalities about how much this can impact kids need to be updated to account for that fact. And so I had a number of friends whose kids had been exposed and they were working through counseling and a lot of issues, but their children were changed in a way that was concerning. So my kids are still young. Back then my kids, I only had 2 at that time, but the idea was that we've got to change course. We've got to find a way to give parents not only the guidance that I think they are looking for, but then also the tools that can really protect their kids as they venture forth.
In the situations that you saw that were so difficult with these teenagers, et cetera, maybe what did the parents try to do, or maybe this comes to why you developed Canopy. What can you do? What do you recommend in those situations? And maybe that funnels into you explaining Canopy more to us.
Yes, so I think the number one piece of advice that we can give, no matter where you are in parenting, is that there's not one conversation you have. You have conversations early and often. And so much of our kids' education, whether we like it or not, is occurring online. And when they have questions, often innocent questions, age-appropriate questions, they will go online and they will be told things from anonymous strangers that potentially have different objectives in mind. And so ensuring that you can always be, if not the first, among the first places that they turn when they have questions, even if they are uncomfortable, and that you will not be angry or upset with those questions, I think is incredibly important just to establish. Once a child has been out into the world and exposed to this content, I think parents have to recognize that it can impact their imagination, it can set expectations for them. None of this is permanent. Our brains are plastic and we do have a capacity to heal, and that's the good news, but the sooner that you can identify it, put it in its place, by which I mean help parents understand how this emerges in the world. One small fact, 62% of first exposure to pornography is accidental. Oftentimes this is not a child seeking it out, they can just be exposed to it. And then taking the steps to understand that there's something higher, greater, better out there, which is what makes this thing problematic.
What are some of the statistics on what's going on with, pornography, et cetera?
It's a great question. It's tough to know just because asking kids about this, you always need to be careful. But as best we can tell, the average age of exposure to hardcore pornography today in America is somewhere between 9 and 11 years of age. 62% of the time of first exposure is accidental, unintentional. They're not seeking it out. And if this children are exposed early, it is one of the greatest releases of dopamine that exists, which is compelling and brings folks back in. So we're dealing with pornography that is more potent, it's more addictive, and as a result, more harmful. This then is resulting in greater impact on children once they are exposed. So you're starting to see shifts in taste, you're starting to see mental anguish that kind of emerges as kids really struggle. Sometimes it manifests as depression, sometimes they feel isolated and kind of withdraw back. And so it has a number of kind of mental health impacts on kids, vast majority of which are negative. So across the board, you're starting to see that kids, when they're exposed earlier, just having a harder and harder time.
And I would say, from what you're saying and all the studies that I've heard of, that this is not something that doesn't matter. It causes all kinds of different emotions and changing, decision making. And I know, we've had another episode where it's, this grandfather is actually in prison because of it. And he says, this will take you places you never thought you would go. And so it is really important what you're doing. We can all stop and make a choice and say, hey, we're going to do something about this, and we're going to, turn from it, because, God promises that, submit to God, resist the devil, and he'll flee from us. So we can, God's got a way for us to get out. So explain that to us. How can we make this a better world? How does Canopy help, the situation that we're going through?
So Canopy is a software tool that you would install on your children's smartphones, tablets, or computers. Once installed, it works in the background and automatically scans all internet traffic, irrespective of what browser they're using. Thanks to this Israeli technology I referenced earlier, we're able to look at every word, every image, and every video on every website that you go to in milliseconds and ensure that we are removing any content that contains pornographic or nude content before it populates on your child's screen. So we think this is a tool that is as dynamic as the internet itself, which is important because every single day there are thousands of new websites being created. Websites that were fine yesterday have problematic content today. And so many of the most popular platforms where kids go, whether it's Reddit or Twitter, as two examples, do contain significant amounts of pornography. So we invented this and brought it to market here with hopes that we could shield kids. And that's an important thing that I want to dwell on for a second. We can create space. We think Canopy is probably the most effective tool out there to prevent exposure to pornography. But at the end of the day, it can only create space, and it does not alleviate parents of the need and really the privilege to still do the parenting work, which is hard, I know. That's so necessary because at some point they will venture off into the world, and you want them to be equipped to, when they come across problematic content, say, that's not for me, and turn away from it.
You got involved 3 years ago, correct? And did you bring it then over here because you saw the success that the Israeli company was having?
Yes, so raised an investment round in 2019, in large part to take the technology and bring it here in a product form that would be suitable and hopefully successful for the American market. And again, we just identified that despite all the engineering prowess of Silicon Valley, and there are many, many notable and exciting accomplishments, they just weren't taking action on this particular issue. And the consequences of that were that millions and millions of American kids were being handed devices, oftentimes for good objectives, right? Education, connecting with family, but in the process then having a portal to some of the most offensive content out there. And so that's really what we wanted to jump in and do, and launched our first product last year. So we're just about a year into being in the US market. Very excited about that, and every couple of weeks, thanks in part to our team in Israel, launching new features and new ways to kind of serve families online.
What are some of the things parents are saying about it?
Parents are saying a number of things. First, they are surprised that it works in the background, right? Oftentimes, this whole notion of parental control or internet filter has a bad rap. It tends to slow down your device. It engages in overblocking, so your kid's constantly coming to you, arguing about this tool. It becomes a point of tension with kids, because if the kid's constantly being frustrated from doing things that aren't problematic, that tends to lead towards friction with a parent. Canopy was designed to be a scalpel instead of a butcher's cleaver. And so kids oftentimes aren't even aware that it's on their device. Now, they're aware it's on there, but it's not interrupting their daily interaction. And so that's one thing. A lot of parents are kind of pleasantly surprised that this is not the clunky tool that they're typically familiar with in the category. So that's one thing. Second thing that I think has been surprising is we've had a number of parents, probably upwards of 20 now, that have come to us and said, I don't even know what Canopy is, where their own children have been the instigator for putting it on their devices. And my takeaway from that is I think that there's a big gap of understanding for what pornography is doing to the generation that's grown up among devices, and how parents still are thinking about maybe how it was maybe 40 years ago. So that's kind of been a surprise for us.
God is love, and love comes from God. In 1 John, the Bible tells us that God is not only all-loving, but that He actually is love itself. The heart of the Parent Compass television show is to bring the transforming love of God to families everywhere. In every Parent Compass episode, true stories reveal family struggles and how their lives were radically changed by the love of God. Parent Compass, an award-winning television series, is completely funded by people like you. If you have been touched by God and you want to share God's love to others, would you please pass it on? Jesus tells us to go into all the world and to tell about Him. With your donation, you allow us to take this television show into many different nations and in many different languages, free of charge. And a portion of your donation goes to Parent Compass Outreach to feed starving children. Your gift does so much. To make your tax-deductible gift, go to parentcompass.tv/ donate. That's parentcompass.tv/donate. And thank you for sending love and hope around the world.